The polar ice caps have melted, and the water has flooded all the continents. There is a sailor who has spent most of his life on the open water. He dives into the ocean, retrieves various trinkets and sometimes soil from the seabed, and then sells them to the inhabitants of floating cities. Occasionally, sailors meet and exchange goods or information. While the sailor was underwater, another boat approached his vessel, and its owner stole the fruits of a slime tree. The sailor could have easily caught the thief on his high-tech trimaran, but a group of hostile people living on oil tankers, the smokers, appeared. The sailor had to damage the thief's mast to provide the smokers with something to scavenge. He then went to the nearest city to exchange trinkets for water and other useful items. At first, the sailor was not allowed into the atoll. However, when the sailor showed the guards a jar of soil, the gates opened immediately. People here live on iron platforms attached to walls. They grow trees and send the dead to be processed, disposing of them into nutrient-rich sludge. The sailor quickly exchanged the soil for local currency and went shopping, but someone had already been there before him. A witness of the purchase arrived at the store and told the shopkeeper, Helen, that the sailor had brought incredibly pure soil. Helen was very interested in this. Meanwhile, a man named Cor was interrogating an old man with a girl on his back who had a map. Those who decipher this map can reach dry land. Cor wants to sell this information to the smokers. The old man tells him that the girl lives with Helen and her name is Enola. At Helen's store, the sailor bought everything, including fresh water and the shelves on which the goods used to lie. Upon returning to his trimaran, he was met by local residents. They asked the sailor to mate with a young woman to diversify the genetic material of the atoll. Otherwise, the people here would die out within a few generations. The sailor refused, and the people suspected something was wrong. They grabbed him, but then they saw gills behind his ears. Realizing that he was a mutant, the guards tried to arrest him, but he escaped. They eventually caught the sailor with a net. The guards wanted to kill the mutant on the spot, but the leader of the atoll forbade it. They locked him in a cage while the atoll council decided what to do with him. They tried to understand the significance of the items he brought on his trimaran. When they found a children's toy and a leg exerciser, they assumed they were torture devices and decided to execute the sailor. However, Helen defended him, stating that they hadn't seen such pure soil in many years, not since they found a UFO. This meant he must know where dry land is, but the atoll residents refused to listen to Helen. The people rebelled against her and now wanted to kill Enola along with the sailor. An old man named Gregor, a scientist and friend of Helen, was trying to solve the mystery of the map on Enola's back. When he figured out which direction the land was, he would take Helen, Enola, and the sailor to dry land. To do this, he even built a hot air balloon. However, old man Gregor was unable to get closer to solving the mystery, and Enola hinted to him that the sailor might know the location of the land, as he had sailed very far. At night, Gregor went to the sailor's cage, and the sailor said he would tell where the land was if Gregor freed him. But the guards noticed Gregor and chased him away. In the morning, the sailor was prepared for execution. While he was being lowered into the nourishing sludge, the guards noticed the ships of the smokers on the horizon. A battle began, in which many locals died, and only a few managed to escape. Gregor tried to take Helen and Enola away on an airship, but accidentally launched it too early, and the woman and girl didn't have time to climb inside. Then Helen ran to the sailor, and she made a deal with him. Helen would release the sailor from the cage, and he would take them away from there on the trimaran. The sailor agreed, and together they opened the gates and escaped from the smokers. The sailor even managed to blow up the main ship of the bandits, where their leader, Deacon, was seated. However, Deacon survived, losing only his left eye. The sailor, Helen, and Enola fled from the pursuit. Initially, the sailor wanted to get rid of one of them so that there would be enough fresh water. But Helen defended Enola and showed that she could be useful on the ship as well. In desperation, Helen offered herself to the sailor as payment for the girl's passage. But he refused, noticing the woman's disgust. She was repulsed by the idea of making love with a mutant. In the meantime, Enola settled in on the trimaran. She found colored pencils in the hold and painted all the surfaces with them. The sailor didn't like this. The girl chattered incessantly, asking a lot of questions, and the sailor didn't like this either.
I told Helen you wouldn't be so ugly if you cut your hair.
He even had to throw her overboard so that Enola would be quiet for a while. But it turned out that she didn't know how to swim. The sailor turned the ship around and picked up Enola, as well as Helen, who had jumped in to help her. Deacon had lost an eye but was not going to give up. All his power rested on the belief of his subordinates that God sent him visions, and in these visions, he showed Deacon the land. Therefore, he sent an airplane in search of the sailor's trimaran. The pilots found the ship and began to shell it, and the sailor ran to the hold for weapons. Helen thinks that he is hiding, so she shoots at the plane with a harpoon and hits it. Now the plane is circling around the trimaran as if tied to it. The sailor realizes that the plane can damage the mast, so he climbs up, aims, and is ready to shoot the pilot. However, the pilot fires a bullet at the rope and detaches himself. The sailor is furious at Helen's actions, as she didn't listen to him, and now the trimaran is even more damaged than after escaping from the toll. As a punishment, he cuts the woman's hair and then gives her a haircut and a noli. After this incident, the trimaran encounters a vagrant in the sea, who is floating on a fragile vessel. The sailor needs tar to patch the holes in the trimaran and hopes to get it from the vagrant. However, the vagrant only has a few sheets of paper as valuable items and wants a woman or girl in exchange for them. The sailor gives him half an hour with Helen but then changes his mind. The vagrant is unhappy that the deal was cancelled at the most interesting moment. He pulls out a knife and tries to kill the sailor. The attempt fails and the vagrant dies. The sailor is injured and uses this opportunity to feed his women. He ties himself to the ship and jumps into the water. At the smell of blood, a sea monster arrives and swallows the sailor whole. He breaks through the monster's belly and gets out. And now they have fresh meat for dinner. The next day, the trimaran arrives at the exchange post. All this time, the sailor was leading the ship there to buy tar for repairs. But the exchange post workers were killed. Smokers had overtaken the sailor and set up an ambush there. However, the sailor notices the trap in time and skillfully avoids the smokers' attacks. He then shoots air with an additional sail to increase the speed of the ship. The deacon doesn't want to let his prey escape so easily. He takes a rifle with an optical sight, shoots the sailor, and hits him. The sailor bandages his wound and then directs his trimaran towards the flooded cities. Helen doesn't want to believe that there is no land. She tells the sailor that she found an Enola in a basket filled with black soil. In response, the sailor decides to show her the only land he has seen in his life. He lowers an air-filled container into the water, sits Helen in it, and takes her to the very bottom. Here, the flooded skeletons of houses darken. Seeing all this, Helen loses faith. On the surface, the smokers are on the sailor's trail, but Nola is hiding in the trimaran's hull. The smokers had to wait for Helen's return to find out where the girl was hiding. When they couldn't get the information, the deacon resorted to trickery. He threatened to kill Helen, and Enola jumped out of her hiding place. They captured her, and the adults tried to kill her. However, the sailor pulled Helen underwater where they could both breathe through his gills. Before leaving, the smokers burned the sailor's trimaran. He and Helen climbed onto the remains of the ship, where they were picked up by an old man named Gregor. Gregor had noticed the smoke from afar and approached it. The three of them arrived at the boats where the survivors of the atoll were hiding, and Helen asked for help. However, they refused to save Enola, and even the sailor didn't want to swim after the girl. He took one of the boats and sailed away. The sailor returned to the remains of his trimaran, went into the hold to get what he needed, and saw Enola's drawings. He realized that he had seen similar ones in an old magazine and began to believe that the land Helen spoke of existed. While he was away, two smokers on jet skis approached the people and decided to rob them. However, the sailor emerged from the water and killed both of them. He announced that he had returned to save Enola. Helen and Gregor helped him make incendiary grenades by pouring fuel from one jet ski into a bottle. Then the sailor sailed away. The deacon couldn't solve the mystery of the map on Enola's back. However, he didn't tell his subordinates about it. Instead, he gave an inspiring speech about how they were all going to land immediately, and the tanker where the smokers lived went at full speed. Meanwhile, the sailor sneaked onto the tanker and began killing the smokers who were getting in his way. The bodies were noticed, and an alarm was raised. A hunt for the sailor began. All this time, Enola was held captive, and she threatened that when the sailor came for her, he would kill him in a particularly agonizing way. And then her prediction came true when Deacon's crew scattered to their posts to row the tanker towards a bright future. The sailor appeared on the deck with an incendiary grenade in his hand. He demanded Enola in exchange for the tanker's safety, but Deacon didn't believe him. He thought the sailor was bluffing, so the sailor threw the grenade into an oil tank and it ignited. Flames burst from every hole and crack in the tanker. Deacon, not being a fool, quickly realized that he wouldn't survive on this ship. He grabbed Enola and dragged her onto a small plane. As the sailor made his way to Deacon's command post, Deacon had already fled. However, there, he was met by a smoker named Idris, who would have killed the sailor if he hadn't reloaded his shotgun in time. The sailor dealt with Idris, created a makeshift zip line, and jumped down to save Enola. He prevented the plane from taking off, pulled the girl out of it, and at that moment, old Gregor arrived with Helen and the leader of the atoll. They pulled out the sailor and Enola, but the tenacious Deacon grabbed the girl's leg. Helen threw a wrench and hit the villain in the head. He fell into the water, and the tanker sank. Deacon and a few others survived. Deacon shot at Enola, who fell out of the hot air balloon basket. Deacon and 2 smokers chased after her. The sailor didn't hesitate for a second. He tied an elastic rope around his ankle, jumped down, grabbed the girl, and rose above the water. Deacon and the others couldn't stop in time. Several days of flying without fresh water and food took their toll on the travelers. They were exhausted and could barely move. Prager finally deciphered the map on Enola's back. And all this time, they had been flying towards land. And where the Earth was supposed to be, they found a green island. There were rivers, waterfalls, many plants, and animals on the island. They find the home of Enola's parents, who had given her the tattoo and sent her out to sea as a baby. Inside the house, they find 2 skeletons on the floor. Everyone is happy, but the sailor feels uneasy. He is afraid to stay in this place, as he cannot live on solid ground. His element is water. The sailor finds Enola's parents' catamaran and loads it with provisions. He wants to return to the sea and find other mutants like himself. As a farewell gift, Enola gives the sailor a music box she found in her parents' home. Promises Helen that if he meets other people, he will tell them about this island. In response, Helen gives the sailor the name Odysseus. The sailor sails away, and Helen and Enola watch him from the top of the island. Here, the girl finds a plaque stating that this is the place where ancient travelers first climbed Mount Everest. That's all for today. Subscribe to Fast Review and please like and leave comments if you want more similar videos.